All right. I believe we can make a start now, and then other participants can join as the session proceeds. Welcome everyone to the Friday Spotlight feature. As you can see, today's topic is USI integration. My name is Shivangi, and I'm the Compliance and Integration Consultant at Mesh Group. In today's session, we'll look at USI integration, which is one of the key features for all Mesh platform users. We've got users from all Mesh products in today. We've got meshed higher ed users, meshed Cricos users, and meshed vet platform users as well, because this is one feature in the system that is consistent for all the platforms. The webinar slides and recording will be shared soon after the session. And if you have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to write in the chat with your full name as well as the college details so that we can reach out to you once the session's completed. In today's session, we'll have a look on the following topics. So first, we'll try and understand what is a USI and why and who needs a USI. Once we are done with this, we'll also proceed on to understanding USI integration with the mesh system. This is one thing which can help you to set up the integration in the mesh platform, be it the higher ed platform, the Cricos RTOManager platform, or VET RTOManager platform, so that without having to go to the USI registry manually, you can record student USIs in the system directly. We'll also try and understand USI machine credentials or USI key store, which is needed for the integration with the mesh platform. Next topic for today will be document verification service or DVS. Then we'll talk about student consent and different ways a student consent can be collected. One of the ways the student consent can be taken is within the mesh platform itself using the student portal. We'll explore more on that in the upcoming slides. Then we'll talk about recording USI in the mesh platform. So there are 3 pages where a USI can be recorded for an application, offer, or student. We'll have a look on that. There is also a report available in the system which can give you details on missing student USIs. So if you have any student where USI is not recorded, how you can extract that report to have more insights on that, we'll look into that. And finally, we'll see what is the permission available in the system for you to grant that permission or revoke it for certain users to use the USI feature. So let's make a start by understanding what USI is. So as we all know, USI is unique student identifier. It's a combination of 10 unique numbers and letters which is assigned for an individual once they sign up for USI. This is an education number for life. Any vet education that a student takes in Australia, a government authorized record for that vet training is created using the USI transcript. This was implemented in 2012 by the Council of Australian Governments and is supported by the Student Identifiers Act 2014. There are more details on USI, which you can find using the link that we have provided on this slide here. This gives you an idea on what USI is, and this link also takes you to the USI registry page where you can read more about the USI usage for providers as well as students. So let's understand who needs a USI. Now, having known what USI is and what makes up a USI, who are the people who actually require a USI? So there are 2 categories of students where a USI would be mandatory. One is VET and the another one is higher education. For VET training, any student who is undertaking any NRT or nationally recognized training would require a USI, which also includes any training taken using VET in schools. For higher education sector, any student who is graduating 2023 or after would require to have a USI in order to get their graduation certificates. So this brings us to why is a USI needed? So as we have understood that there are 2 sectors of students who require a USI, which is the VET sector and the higher education sector, we can now understand why is a USI needed. So first we need a USI to access the VET transcripts, which is applicable for any student who is undertaking a VET course or an NRT course. Then it is required for higher ed students who are graduating in a higher ed course and receiving their graduation statements. It is also needed for any higher education student who is willing to enroll in a CSP. CSP is a Commonwealth supported place which is applicable for any higher education provider who is HESA approved. And finally, the USI is also needed if the student is willing or wants to access any sort of help loans, which includes both higher ed and VET providers who have HESA approvals for HEX help loan, fee help loan, or VSL, which is VET student loan. So, all these categories, if the student would want to proceed with this or already has an application for any of these categories or wants to access their transcripts or graduation certificates, they would need to have a USI in order to successfully do so. So, now that we have understood what is a USI, who requires a USI, and why is it needed, let's try and understand how we can integrate the USI within the mesh platform itself. The Mesh USI integration is a two-way real-time integration with the USI registry system, which establishes a web service connection and allows the user to do create USI, locate USI, and verify USI functions within the system itself. For every platform, you will see the USI Mass ST tile on your homepage itself once you are logged in. And once you click onto this tab, you will see there are multiple pages and features that you can use and perform within this USI feature. So let's explore more on these bits. But before we do so, let's try and understand what is the process to integrate the USI feature with the mesh system. Now, this is a key process which every client or every provider would need to do in order to establish the integration. If one or more of these steps are missing, you would not be able to establish the integration and you will use the integration within the platform. So let's look at the steps. The very first step is USI system access request. Now, this is one of the steps which often gets overlooked. In this step, you need to fill out a form which is available using the link provided on the slide here. Once you fill out this form, you will get an email from the USI registry confirming your access. One thing to note here is this form allows you to not just access the USI registry, but also access the web service application of USI. The details that you provide in this form must match the details that you have provided on the mesh platform itself. So it can include details like your ABN number, the legal name for the college, and the contact details. So make sure that you have these details consistent across the two platforms. Because if these details do not match, there can be certain errors when the USI is integrated. So after you have filled out the form, the second step is to obtain a digital identity in RAM. RAM stands for Relationship Authorization Manager, which is a website managed by the Australian national government. So this is a process where you need to go and register your organization as well as your individual account in MyGov and establish an identity in RAM. Once you have done that, you will be proceeding to the next step, which is installing the browser extension. Now, this may or may not be required depending on the device that you're using and also depending on the operating system that you're using. There are different steps and methods to install the browser extension for different operating systems, and that can be found on the department's website itself. After you have got the browser extension, the next step is to create the key store file or create the machine credentials. After you provide the machine credentials details such as the key store name and the key store password, you will be having a file with you which is downloaded on your device as the key store file. And after you have completed all the first four steps, you can go to the Mesh platform and upload those machine credentials or the key store files in the Mesh platform and click Setup to start the integration or make the integration active. Now, in all these steps, one thing to also note is that the S-admin users or the users who have principal authority access in the RAM website are the ones who can perform these actions. You may also be able to complete these steps if you have an access of authorized user in the RAM website. But any of these steps must be completed at your end, and this is not something that can be completed by us. So once you have completed all these steps and ready to upload your key store file, that's where we can assist. So let's look on to the USI integration with the mesh system, and we move on to our topic where we have different icons that are available in the mesh platform once you log in. So as we have understood the steps to create a USI machine credential, let's try and understand what are the different icons that you will see on the mesh platform once you are in the USI page. So the first icon, as you can see on your screen, is the icon used for mass ST configuration. So this is the icon where you will ideally go and set up the machine credentials that you have installed from RAM. The next icon on this slide is for process verify. As the icon name suggests, this allows you to verify an existing USI for a student. This is the landing page. Once you click on the USI tile on the home page, this is the page where you are taken. The third icon is the Create USI icon. Again, as the name suggests for itself, this icon allows you to create a USI for a student. Then we have the locate USI option, by which you can locate a USI. So if you're unsure if the student has a USI or not, you can use this feature and it will use the details that you have recorded for the student in the system to try and locate or search the USI within the USI registry. The next icon, as you can see, is the icon used to add or update student DVS or document verification service information. This is something that we'll cover in the upcoming slides. And finally, we have the export data button, which allows you to export the data from the grid into MS Excel. So as we have understood the icons and have a brief look on them, now let's try and see where we can set up the configuration. So as I've mentioned in the previous slide, this is the icon where you will need to go in order to do the USI integration setup. So as the name suggests, Mass ST configuration is Machine Authentication Service Secure Token Configuration. So once you have the key store or machine credentials ready and installed on your device using the RAM and all the process that we have talked about, you can log into the mesh platform, go to USI and come to this page. So as you can see in the screenshot here, the system tells me that I have previously uploaded some credentials on certain date. And if I want to reset the service, I can simply click on yes here, and this will open up the new fields for us to upload the key store file, put in the details and click setup. If the setup was never done before, or if it is a new platform where the USI integration service was never available before, the page will directly open with the new fields for you to update the service. The date and timestamp that you see here is the date and timestamp of the last setup that was done by the user. Now to do the setup, as you can see in the previous page, if I may go back here, there are certain fields that we have. We have the mass ST key ID, mass ST passcode, and the keystore.xml file. So in the next slide, let's try and understand what these fields are. And once you have the details from RAM, how will you map them to the mesh system? So mass ST key ID, which is the first field that you need to provide in our system, is the subject name ID of the machine credential in RAM. So once you have the credential, you will see that on the RAM page, there will be a field which is subject name ID. What you need to do is simply copy paste that name in the mass ST key ID field in the system. Then we have the mass ST passcode. This is the passcode that you provide once you're creating your machine credentials in the RAM website. The passwords need to match. If the passwords do not match and you set up without that, you will see some errors when you're trying to use the feature. So make sure that you have noted down these details somewhere. So when you're setting it up in the system, you will have the correct password. And finally, the keystore.xml file. So this is the file or the machine credential that gets downloaded once you perform all the steps as we have talked about before. You will need to locate this file in your computer, and once you have this file, you simply upload it to the mesh system. One thing to keep in mind here is that the keystore file expires every 2 years from the creation date. And it needs to be created again using the same process by the principal authority or the authorized user in RAM to keep using the USI service in the system. There is no auto renewal of USI key store available in the mesh platform. So once the key store file expires, you will need to go to the RAM and do the steps again. Now, as we've understood how the integration works and how it can be set up within the system, we can talk about document verification services or DVS. So USI registry system uses the DVS to verify details using the ID documents for any student. You can use it in the USI registry itself manually, but once you have the integration set up on the mesh platform, along with creating, verifying, and locating USIs for the student, DVS is another function that can be used. To create a USI or update any details for students, such as student's name, date of birth, or any other details, you would need a verifiable Australian identification document. Now, to understand what these documents are and what specifications does USI have in terms of these documents, you can simply go to this link that we have provided in the slide, and it takes you to the page where USI details the DVS document types that are eligible. In the mesh system itself, once you are on the USI page, you can see that there is the DVS info or the document information. Currently, it's not provided, so you can see there is not provided yet written there. And using that, sorry about that. And once you click on the not provided yet, you will see that it opens a new pop-up window for you to enter the DVS document details for the student. These DVS document details will usually include the DVS document type and other relevant details for that document. For example, if the driver's license is one of the DVS documents that you're trying to upload, the details that are applicable would be the state of issue, the license number, and the card number. The proof of ID document is an optional field. You may or may not want to upload a document file, but if you want to, you can simply choose and upload the file. And once you have recorded the DVS information, I'm sorry, there is some system update, so I'll just need to remove that. Okay, all good. So once you have selected the DVS document that you want to upload, you can simply click on record data, and that will record the DVS information for the student. Now, after the DVS comes the student consent. Student consent is one of the most important things when you're using the USI feature or even going to the USI registry to perform any functions for the student USI. In order to create USI, locate USI, or verify USI for a student or on the student's behalf, a student consent must be taken. There are different ways that you can take student consent. We have listed a few of them here. So let's look at them one by one. The very first way to take a student consent is using the student portal in the mesh system itself. We'll talk about it in the next slide. Then you can also do so by using the application terms and conditions. The 5-step application that is filled in the mesh platform, you may have your own terms and conditions set up there for the student to agree to, so that at the time of application itself, you have the student consent. There's another way to obtain student consent, and that is custom fields. You may set up some custom fields or custom questions in your application, 5-step application, so that the student consent can be taken at the application stage itself. There can be some sort of manual processes at your end to record the student consent. These processes are something which is maintained completely outside of the system to take student consent for USI purpose. And there could be some other processes that you may have at your end to take student consent. However, be it whatever way, it is very important to take student consent so that you are able to do things on their behalf in terms of USI. So let's explore further on student consent form using the student portal. For platforms where student portal is activated, you will see that when a student logs in, they will be able to see a tab which is USI request to send consent form to their provider. And once the student clicks on it, this is the page that opens, which is the USI consent form page. The student details such as student name, and other address details will be populated based on what is in the system, and the student can simply provide the DVS document as well as the file if required and submit. So this is a way for the student to go into the student portal of the mesh system and grant their provider or their training provider an access or consent to their USI. Once this is done, the system does the following. So what the system does after the student submits the consent form. So the very first thing the system does is the system triggers an email to the student, and that email follows a predefined email template, which is student USI consent form, mail notice to admission. This email template is modifiable at your end. So if you're required to edit this email template, you can, but there is some default content in that template. And the student receives an email as soon as he submits the consent form. The documents that the student upload as well as the DVS form that the student submits is also stored in the document page for the student. So if you go to the student profile and go under document section, you will be able to see the DVS information the student has provided. And finally, the DVS document as well as the consent form details get updated within the USI page itself, which can be later on verified by the staff and marked as checked and ready by the staff to go for USI operations such as verifying, locating USI, or creating one. So this is the way the student consent can be taken using the mesh platform. If you do not have student portal, then unfortunately this feature will not be available, but you can always reach out to the sales team if you would like to explore more on this. So let's talk about recording USI. So now after completing all these steps, you are finally ready to record the USI for a student application or offer. In application step 1, whether it is being filled by an agent from agent portal, from public portal, or by the staff from admin portal, the USI can be recorded. Similarly, once the application is submitted and if the USI was not recorded, you are able to do so from the offers manage page by clicking on edit application. You can enter a USI at that stage. If the USI is also not recorded at that stage, you can still do so from the student profile page by going into individual student, putting in the USI number and clicking on record. So these are the 3 pages where you can still go for individual students and record USIs. But if you want to do it all together for multiple students, you can use the USI page as we have seen in the previous slides. So now let's talk about this report, which gives you an idea on where the missing or if there are any students with missing USIs in the system. This is an important report because there are multiple features in the system that are governed by the presence of USI. As we can see in the note here that missing USI numbers for students can cause errors and warnings even when generating certificates in the system. Some of you may have already experienced that when you try to generate a certificate, the system throws a validation that USI is not recorded. So that's just one way for the system telling you that the student is missing the USI. This can be bypassed. You can still proceed to generate a USI, but it's always recommended to have one. Further, it can also cause issues or give you errors and warnings when you're trying to do your reporting. For any vet training providers, a vet miss reporting, and for any higher education providers, TCSI reporting may give you errors and warnings which for students with missing USI numbers. Also, if your platform has the CAN notice and invoice notice feature, you may see that students with missing USI numbers are not available in the grid for you to generate CAN and invoice. It's simply because USI is required to access any sort of help loans. Also for ECAF, if your platform has the ECAF enrollment management, which again comes for only higher ed fee help approved providers or vet fee help approved providers, If you have the ECAF management module and you do not have any USI recorded for the student will not appear for you to create an ECAF enrollment. So there are multiple areas in the system where a USI plays a mandatory role or an important role. So this report that we're talking about is comes handy when you try to understand what students do not have USI. So the report category is student services and the report name is student list with missing USI numbers studying between two dates. You can specify the report based on different course types or even for individual course or student status and run it between any two dates to simply look at the data where the USI is required and you can record using the USI integration as we have talked before. The final topic for today is permission for USI process or generation. So as we mentioned in the very beginning, there are certain permissions that you can grant in the system to certain users, so that they can use the USI feature. By default, any SAdmin or superadmin users will have access to the USI feature. They would not need any sort of permission to be enabled for them. However, if you are not an SAdmin or superadmin in the system, then you would require the USI permission to be granted. To do so, you can simply go to admin, setup permission, and under setup permission, there is a permission by the name USI process or generation. You can specify the user roles that this permission needs to be applied for, and then you can eventually grant it to any individual or multiple users as you want. And once they have this permission, they should be able to use the USI feature similarly how an SAdmin can use. With this, we come to the end of the presentation for today. I hope that this USI integration spotlight feature presentation for today was helpful for all the attendees here. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us at support@meshgroup.com.au. And please feel free to write in the chat any questions that you may have with your college details and your details so we can get back to you after the session. Thank you very much.